We're back. Episode 4.
Episode 4.
Can you believe we actually have people subscribing?
We do. It's A New Hope, episode 4.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does that mean our 7th episode is going to be crappy?
1, 2, and 3. I mean, 1, 2, yeah, 7 wasn't very good in that series either, was it?
No. So we got to make sure 7 is really good.
Have you seen the trailer? The teaser trailer came out?
Mm-mm.
I think Luke's going to go to the dark side.
I don't know. I'll let you know when I see the movie.
I think it will. So anyway, what show is this again?
This is 4.
No, what's
No,
this?
ours. Oh.
You're supposed to tell the...
Riffs and... Well, they know who we are. It's Riffs and Rabbit Holes. I'm Charles. This is Jim. And you may notice that our seats are switched.
Yes, we are reversed today. We're doing everything backwards. All right. So, and later on, halfway through, we're going to do our 60-second shred, our first installment of that.
You have some new beverage here. You've got a thing. You're going to drink something different every time.
You know, you got to have variety in life. So, all right. So last week we talked about we introduced people to the NPP. How many of you can tell me what NPP stands for? Charles, what's NPP?
Isn't that
It's not a medical term.
It's a rap group, isn't it?
It's a rap. Yeah, it was a hit song in the 80s.
So we were talking about the new perspective on Paul.
Mm-hmm.
This was all the rage back in the 90s, by the way. A little less so now. But
So we're about 20 years behind.
well, I don't know. Are we 20 years behind in fashion?
No, I don't know.
He might be.
I just bought this weekend. So,
Well, but it's still relevant, and it's relevant in that its basis has pretty much been taken for granted by everyone outside evangelical Christianity. That basically Paul really remained a Jew for all intents and purposes, and in his letters in the New Testament, he was not trying to say Judaism is off the table. Judaism is how to earn your way at heaven. That's false. Jesus brought an entirely new religion. He's saying, no, Jesus was the Jewish Messiah. He fits in nicely. And this whole faith versus works thing is basically not, doesn't apply that Jews were intending to earn their way to heaven. It means Jews were counting on their privilege, having the Torah and being God's chosen people is their way in. And we talked a bit about N.T. Wright, and you talked quite a bit about N.T. Wright.
yeah, I got kind of worked up.
You have since talked even more about N.T.
I'm on
Wright.
pins and needles. My wife warned me to be good this time.
I'm going to
Not talk about my truck.
I'm going to put out there that and you can talk some more about N.T. Wright because I know you're just bubbling to talk. I'm going to put out there a couple things that I think make Wright and some of the people who have followed in his footsteps very appealing to this generation. Mm-hmm. One is just in terms of the bigger picture. He really puts everything together in a way that no one else in evangelical scholarship has done. If you look at, like, and both of us belong to churches that would be considered dispensational. It's a fair statement. We could talk about that for 10 minutes, but we won't.
Yeah, we'll go by that.
At any rate, I mean, a lot of people have noticed, well, you've got Jesus in the Gospels talking about loving your neighbor, being good to your neighbor, living a godly life. And then you've got Paul in the epistles talking about getting saved by faith and how works aren't necessary and how it's necessary for people to be personally saved. And it's not a few people who have noticed, well, wait a minute, Paul and Jesus seem to be talking about different things. And obviously there are ways to harmonize that. And in fact, they're not talking about different things. But N.T. Wright has found a way to smooth that out and make it look like they're talking about exactly the same thing.
And we actually linked from the last episode. If you go to the website on the resources and links page, we linked to a YouTube video, I believe, of N.T. Wright. And if we didn't, we'll put it up there. Of N.T. Wright delivering an address at, I think it was Calvin College. And he kind of articulates this whole big picture thing of his. And I'm not going to lie, it was like, wow, that's kind of cool.
Right.
That links together a whole bunch of stuff.
Right. Jesus' teachings are about him as the Messiah of Israel. His miracles are about doing what prophecy said the Messiah would do. And he fulfills all of those. And then Paul fits nicely in N.T. Wright's model, which doesn't take Paul as emphasizing faith versus good deeds, but rather Paul as saying, well, now that Jesus is the Messiah, that means Isaiah 49, it's time to fulfill the kingdom. The Gentiles come in, one people of God instead of the Jews and non-Jews separated. So it fits very well.
Would you say that it kind of, it's a way of approaching Scripture that kind of syncs well with kind of the mood, the spirit of the age, maybe now within evangelical circles, what's starting to come out. People want this kind of big picture, just kind of thing. But there's one concern I have with it.
We haven't even heard the other side of the big picture, though.
Well, that's true, and I'll let you get to that.
That's going to make you very concerned. Doesn't he look concerned?
I'll try to restrain my volume.
Pull his mic back there.
What worries me is this: is you mentioned how he's a big picture guy, but when you actually get into the text of individual text in Scripture and start looking at it and exegeting it, you start finding a lot of holes. And my concern is that him, and even Heiser does this to a certain extent, but not nearly as much. But he's not a big guy like N.T. Wright is yet. So, but encouraging that habit of embracing this big picture and ignoring a mounting series of texts that seem to say, hold on a second, wait a minute, no, that doesn't really work there.
Yeah,
that's a bad habit. And my concern is that people are ready to embrace that approach because it allows them to do the same thing in other areas.
That might be the case. I mean, touching on that, a particular text is Romans 4:1.
Now, what does that actually say? Because I know you mentioned that last time, but you didn't really dig into that much.
Well, and it actually just so happens this Bible is opened up to Romans 4.
Wow, that's amazing.
Although the Greek text over here is opened up to somewhere else. I could find it. N.T. Wright takes a different translation. He actually takes the translation that I believe was first put forth by Richard Hayes. But he says, actually, I'll give you first the traditional translation from the King James, because that's what I have. What shall we say then that Abraham, our father, as pertaining to the flesh, hath found? Okay, that's pretty standard. Mm-hmm. And that's going to introduce the traditional reading of Romans 4, which is that Abraham is a model of somebody who was declared righteous by his faith. He believed God would be true to his promises. Mm-hmm. Wright takes a very different tack. And in fact, in one of his books, I can't remember where this was, he basically comes out and says, this is the most natural reading. And I don't have his reading. I have the Greek text in front of me here. And he says something along the lines of, what then have we found Abraham to be our forefather according to the flesh? Which takes an infinitive in the perfect tense as the main verb of a sentence, which is essentially unheard of.
And that's another big critique of Wright's theology, is there's a lot of novelty, or right. Basically people are saying, look, nobody until you really and a couple other people came along were saying that this is...
Well, it sets it up entirely different, because if the traditional understanding of Romans 4 is Abraham as an example of someone who's declared righteous because of his faith. If you take Wright's reading, it sets up an entirely different chapter 4, which is basically, have we found Abraham to be our forefather according to the flesh? No, he's our forefather according to the Spirit. And then the theme of the chapter becomes God making one people out of two, so that Abraham is the father of a church composed of Jews and Gentiles. It entirely changes the emphasis of Romans 4. It's compelling, but, and I give credit to Dan Wallace for this from Dallas Seminary, for being the one who showed me. I think if you go to the text level, once again, got to learn Greek. It'll only take you a few years, right? I don't think it works. And this isn't the only place where this sort of thing comes up. It's a square peg in a round hole. And from a distance, it looks great. But there's too many instances where Wright is willing to take that square peg and bang it into the round hole. Jim's a woodworking guy, by the way, so that analogy is not lost on him. Mm-hmm. And I think in the end, it just doesn't work. But
okay,
it sounds
so,
good.
All right, then what are the positives of what he's saying? What does he contribute to our understanding that could help us? I mean, is there anything that you would say, you know what, for this reason, you ought to sit down and listen to this guy because he can.
Well, I think, okay, that might be a good place to introduce our second thing that I think is very appealing to this generation, which is that, again, if you step back even farther from N.T. Wright's big picture, it's like the outer space picture, then the New Testament is not so much a document of how do I get saved, but rather what does the church look like? Right? If the theme of Paul's letters is not how does an individual find right status before God, because in Wright's model the theme is what does God's church look like? What does the Messiah's people look like now reconstituted? Then the New Testament is more about what does the church look like and what is the church supposed to do. Okay, that's a lot more appealing.
And I think it helps address, and it also helps address the fact that, we're fish swimming in the sea, and when you're a fish swimming in the sea, you don't notice the water because that's just all you know. And we are swimming in the sea of the United States of America.
I didn't know they had a sea.
And, well, I'm struggling to find a metaphor here, all right? But
stick with woodworking.
Okay, never mind. All right, so what I'm trying to say is there are certain theological tendencies on our side of the pond.
Okay, I think I know.
And one of them is the tendency to individualize everything, personalize everything.
Very much.
And I think part of what Wright is trying to do is saying, you might want to cut that back a little bit. It's not just about you, me, and Jesus under a tree. It's not like that. And we tend to want to make everything, okay, how does this apply to me? And like you said, he's trying to say, okay, look, there's a bigger thing God is doing here than just you. Yeah, you're important.
That's very American.
Yeah, you're important, you matter, and you have to individually come to Christ. But there's something way beyond you. And you can't just keep making it this microscopic, myopic thing. Now, he tends to go off the rails a little bit, I think, on some of that. He calls inerrancy that silly American doctrine.
Ooh.
So, you got to love him for that. Not. But, and he tends to be, he's with biologos there, so he's totally pro-theistic evolution, evolutionary creationism, whatever label you want to use.
So that's another reason for people to like him then, because then if in his big picture, the Bible is more about what God is doing in Jesus, how he is reworking his people, then you look back, the creation narrative in Genesis becomes the beginning of God establishing his people. God creates a people, Adam fails, and then Israel fails, and then Christ, the true Israelite, comes, succeeds where Israel failed, and redeems God, is the mechanism by which God redeems his creation. Then the theme of Genesis 1 and 2 is not where did this physical earth come from and how long did it take.
And you got John Walton and those other guys that really kind of...
And it fits in, but I mean, you can see how it's more palatable for people now. Now the intellectual goes, oh, good, well, I don't have to reconcile my problems with a 6,000-year-old literal earth. In N.T. Wright's model, I don't have to believe that. I can look and see Genesis as metaphorical and intending to introduce this narrative of how God is redeeming the world.
And I think that's one of the reasons why it's really appealing. It gets rid of a lot of pesky arguments that people don't want to spend the time messing around with. But the only problem is pesky arguments, they're there for a reason. I mean, and Paul himself, and the writers of Scripture seem to think that individual words do matter. I mean, there's a big picture, yes, but there's also grammar and syntax. Those things in the text do make that they are what form our theology. It's, and so I can see the appeal, but
you're much more subdued on this today.
Well, I'm under orders. So I'll tell you what. Since you said I was so subdued, let's introduce a little non-subdued element into the program here. We are going to do we announced this last week, our first 60-second shred. So we're going to start with Charles, and then guess I'll switch over to me.
So how random can we make this? I am thinking about buying a fire engine. Not just any fire engine, but a 1958 Mack C85. They're actually very popular in New York, by the way. And this one happens to be located in New York. The guy will deliver it to me, actually.
Let's go get it.
Well, I don't want to drive it back because it might break down. It's from 1958. I'm looking for someone to justify this.
I'm picturing
so
you
I
in
can
the side
justify
of
it
the
to my
road
wife.
with a cell phone and a fire truck waiting
That's
on
right.
AAA.
Hoping somebody can work on this thing's engine. It's a 60-year-old truck. But I must admit, I'm seriously tempted.
So you gonna do it?
I might do it. I just might do it.
What does your wife think about this?
She's
Be
not
careful,
so
it's your
sure.
anniversary.
It is. I can use that for justification. If I buy it, we're definitely incorporating it into the podcast, though.
All right, so while Charles had a nice, neutral, non-offensive topic to talk about, this is not the case with this. Stop getting trolled by Hollywood. All right, I'm not trying to be obnoxious here. I would just like to make one point, please. Like the whole Beauty and the Beast thing, it came out, and for 2 weeks solid before the movie came out, and anybody had even seen it, it was, oh no, here it comes, and they're going to be shoving the gay agenda down people's throats with this movie. Don't take your kids, hide them, don't even tell them it exists. And then it came out, and everybody was like, oh, never mind. Look, this director was yanking our chain. Okay, don't let him do it. Don't let him do it. Just stop. Okay. Finding Dory, there was no gay couple. Beauty and the Beast, I mean, it was just Beauty and the Beast, all right? Let's just stop.
Okay, I don't like the idea to which, or that, I suppose I say, I don't like it that American evangelical Christianity seems to have gotten itself stuck under the thumb of the Republican Party. I should say I am a registered Republican. I do tend to vote Republican, but...
and this isn't the shred.
I thought this was the shred.
No, you already recorded the shred.
That was the fire
You
truck
talked about
stuff.
the fire truck.
That wasn't the shred. That was... Oh, okay.
That was the shred.
This is
I want
the
to see. I want to see you connect this to NT Wright. Go.
Oh, I have no problem doing that.
Really? You can
Yeah,
connect the
indeed.
Republican Party to NT Wright.
Yes.
Go for it.
Very much so.
I wanna hear this.
Do I have to start over?
No, you're already going. I want to hear. This is part of the main segment. I want to hear this.
Okay. This is going to sound, well, maybe not liberal, but I'd like to see Christians in America, particularly evangelical conservative Christians, vote based on what they see in the Bible and not what a Republican politician says. Like I said, I'm a Republican, but too many politicians pay lip service to the Second Amendment and our freedom of religion, and they garner our votes that way, and then they do things that are not...
You know the response to this, right?
I know the response to this, but you want to
You want to go ahead and say it, and then you can respond to that?
Then it's not really a response, though.
Okay, here's the response. We don't live in a perfect world. We're not voting for pastors and deacons. You have, and the alternative is so bad that you take the lesser of the
Now, the
evils.
alternative is not to vote for the other candidate because, yes, and take this example.
But if you
this election.
sit, okay, go ahead.
No, we should. I'd like to see us be proactive, and not just settle for whichever candidate is anti-abortion and anti-same-sex marriage.
But here's,
I'd like to, and that doesn't mean it means ground up. Look what Bernie Sanders did. Now he had some crazy ideas and some even crazier followers, but yet he built a grassroots, ground up campaign.
there's
that
not
really
enough
did things
of
on
us.
his terms.
There's not enough of us.
I think there's more.
Here, I'm going to use one of my favorite phrases from a classic conservative. We cannot immanentize the eschaton. Do you know who said that?
Immanentize the eschaton. I do not.
Bill Buckley. William F. Buckley, National Review. And this was his main criticism of liberalism, is that liberalism attempts to immanentize the eschaton, to bring what will be in the future kingdom into the here and now.
Okay. Yeah, I know. But I think we could still drive the agenda more than we do. For instance,
You really think so?
yes.
Because the problem I see it is politics is downstream from culture. That's one of Breitbart's famous sayings. There is
There's a great source for you.
well, no, I'm not crediting the guy as being some great inspiration, but he had a point. All right, politics is downstream from culture, and I would contend you have a culture right now that has so many systemic problems.
Oh, that's true.
That, I mean, what you're saying, honestly, I don't see it succeeding.
I think we have to try. For instance, I think the influence of corporate interests is too much, and we end up with a lot of, for instance, poor people voting for policies that aren't in their best interest.
Okay,
Like Obamacare. Let's not even get started on that.
Okay.
A lot of people don't even know what's in it. They just know they're against it because it has Obama's name on it.
Okay, here's the problem. We have veered off the road and we're in the woods. What does this have to do with N.T. Wright?
In Britain, you thought I was going to forget. In Europe, in Britain, and in Europe in particular, evangelical Christianity doesn't go hand in hand with social conservatism. In fact, almost the opposite in some respect. Not necessarily on terms of same-sex marriage and other stuff, but evangelical Christians in Britain and other places in Europe are often very pro-environment, pro-labor movement, pro things that like almost a Bernie Sanders type agenda with some of the kooky stuff taken out.
Well, yeah, they got the national security umbrella of the United States, so they can pay for all the other stuff at the same time.
No, and then don't get me wrong here. I'm not saying I do not call myself a liberal, but I would like to see, and N.T. Wright is an example of maybe how this can be done. I'd like to see us get our positions a little bit more from the Bible and a little less from Fox News. And when we've got...
Is that a direct quote from N.T. Wright?
No. I don't know that he listens to it. I don't think he even knows what Fox News is. He might.
But you do bring up the point. All right, N.T. Wright does have something to say on different political issues.
And that's another reason why he's appealing. Yeah. Because he says it's okay to be a person who believes in the resurrection, who believes in a divine Christ, died for our sins, rose bodily, in whom we must believe for salvation. And it's also okay to say, you know what, I think global warming is the problem.
The problem is nobody trusts each other anymore. And you figure you give an inch, you're immediately going to lose a mile. And so, okay. So N.T. Wright's a flaming liberal.
N.T. Wright's not a flaming liberal.
He's not a flaming liberal.
But I tied it to N.T. Wright, and it's
okay. Yeah, you did it. You came around to it. Okay, all right. Okay, how much more time we got here? We got we got a few more minutes.
There's a few more things we could say about the whole NT.
So I mean, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and wrap this up for us. All right, our last thoughts on N.T. Wright and his take on a new perspective.
Well, last thoughts, like about
the last thoughts.
Okay, so a couple. I suppose. And this actually leads me into this other book I've been reading, which is kind of interesting. It's called Salvation by Allegiance Alone. I haven't finished it, so I don't know what I think.
I actually like that title. I've been thinking about that idea lately.
Really?
Yes.
Because
I'll tell you, because I've thought about, what...
This book
ultimately,
is like...
Ultimately, I'm going to tell you what, and this is not an either-or thing. I'm not trying to set up a false dichotomy here. But ultimately, the reason why I am still a Christian is not because I'm invested in a theological system. It's not because of where I went to school. It's not because of, what church I'm a member of. I remain a follower of Christ because I have a personal allegiance that I have sworn to him.
Oh, that's
and that is relational. That is heart and gut level. That is dealing with, the blood, sweat, and tears of walking with God, that it's not exclusive of a theological commitment. And it works with that, but it's a different kind of basis for why I walk with Jesus. And so
Then you might actually like this book.
I might. I'll have to borrow that, and so you have a third book you can't get back.
Yeah. It's not a quick read. It's endorsed by Scott McKnight, so that tells you. Okay, now he's going to change his mind. It's not a quick read. It interacts pretty heavily in grammar, vocabulary. So it's 200 pages, but it's a thick 200 pages.
So he does exegesis.
Very much so.
Okay.
I mean, bigger level, but
okay. Well, even if I disagree with him, I respect the fact he does that.
The idea is going to be and he relies heavily on the work of Barclay, who's the one whose book Paul and the Gift basically says, when Paul describes our salvation,
right,
it's a burgundy book up there. I confess I actually couldn't finish reading that book. It was boring. But the thesis was good. Basically, the idea of Barclay's book is that when Paul describes our salvation as a gift, then in ancient Greek culture, when you use the word charis or gift, it meant there were strings attached. The implication was when a Greek patron gave to a lower level person a gift that he could not repay, it was expected that that person would act favorably towards the patron. So that if God gives us a gift of salvation that we could not earn, it's expected of us that we act in allegiance to him. And this
I don't
book,
know if I base all that off of that word, but yeah, I mean that's
somewhat. Well, again, it's what can I say? It's a boring book. It's 600 pages. You read the first 30 pages.
You don't have to read it. We just told you.
Yeah, you don't.
There you go.
And it's expensive. Don't buy it.
So,
but this book fleshes that out a bit and says basically, when Paul talks about having faith, what he means is having allegiance.
So what that has to do with N.T. Wright?
It fits loosely with what Wright is trying to do. I mean, I think in previous conversations you've accused Wright of being slippery.
Well,
try to pin him down, faith versus works. He wants to be on both. Okay, yeah, he's gonna. I knew I could goad him into doing this.
All right, in the introduction, Thomas Schreiner, who is Southern Baptist, right?
Yeah,
and he is Reformed.
He is.
And he kind of tried to pin Wright down. He said, "Look, what do you mean by what are you trying to say is the basis of the final judgment? In other words, what is the basis upon which God is going to finally declare you justified in the end, and you are now part of the eternal kingdom?" And he basically tried to pin Wright down, and Wright seemed to say that the basis is not works, that we will be judged in accordance with our works, but our works will not be the basis of our justification. And he thought that's what Wright was saying, and so he's like, "Thank you, we're on the same page. Cool, we can move on." And then Wright's like, "Whoa, not so fast."
Or actually, Wright being like, "No,
he literally said, "Not so fast." I'm like,
you have to do the baritone British
and
thing.
he took away with his left hand what he seemed to give with his right.
Well, Wright is going to say that our justification is going to end up being.
What he said was basis is not a biblical word.
Okay, yeah. He hedges.
Trinity is not a biblical word.
But this is a good book. I admit I haven't finished it, but I think it brings in the concept that by faith, we should have. The book is dog-eared. We should have allegiance. I mean, included in our faith should be.
Absolutely.
Should be allegiance, that we shouldn't be expounding a theology that says all you have to do is get saved and never do anything. Okay, that's...
Martyrs don't die for...
nothing.
The fact that they have a degree from a certain seminary. Martyrs die because they are in love with Jesus Christ as their Savior. He is their Master and He is their Lord. That kind of corrective, yeah, I'm all for that. Even if he might take it in certain directions and want to de-emphasize things, I think he ought to emphasize more.
Right.
But anyway.
And in the end, he's going to end up like Wright saying that the gospel in the big picture is Jesus is Lord and not salvation by faith alone.
So let's let that be what we take away from this, okay? Search in the scriptures and work on the big picture and integrating that into your practical Christian walk. I think that's important. All right, so that wraps up MPP. We're going to do a quick cultural segment in lieu of the riff segment because we don't have anything on guitar that we particularly wanted to play today. So,
Oh, we could play something, but
we could.
we'll do the
I'm
cultural
still
thing
working on
instead.
the songs. I'm not ready. So, you want me to go first? You go first.
Is that what we already talked about, the cultural thing?
No, we're getting ready to talk about.
Okay, you do first.
Okay,
then.
all right. I'll go ahead and talk about. All right, I went to go see The Case for Christ last weekend with my daughter Rachel. Note to self: don't bring your 7-year-old daughter to a non-kid movie. But anyway, she did like it. I always brace myself for cringing when I watch a Christian movie, simply because most Christians don't make movies because they love movies. This one is different. This one actually had good casting. This one had good screenplay. A screenplay to me is vital. It was a well-made movie. Even the moment of the conversion scene towards the end there, and I really kind of get antsy with those, because that is one thing that that's hard. I almost feel like this is where the line between acting and real life, I get nervous about that. I'm like, this is the most biggest decision in a person's life, and I get kind of antsy about people depicting that in a movie. But they did it pretty well. It was actually pretty effective. It is a good movie. I would recommend every Christian to watch it. The thing about the movie that I think is its most effective point is it takes seriously the fact that not everyone finds it easy to convert. And you can't just, I remember hearing lots of times in evangelism training in different churches, if people have questions, you know what, don't get sidetracked by the questions, just get the gospel out. Well, maybe in certain encounters that may be appropriate, but you can't ignore questions. You can't blow it off and say, look, just trust Christ and then worry about that stuff later. Well, that doesn't really work for everybody. And it really takes that seriously. That, look, I have to get some kind of peace of mind. My heart can't follow when my brain keeps balking, okay? And it doesn't remove the fact that there is a moral element to conversion. One of the things that you constantly see is his wife praying, God, give him a heart of flesh. In other words, there is a work of the Spirit that goes beyond simply evaluating evidence and coming to an intellectual conclusion. So it's highly recommended. Good movie. Now, what about you? What's your little bit of culture?
Well, I talked about fire trucks. I talked about Bernie Sanders.
Yeah. You got anything left?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I've got 3 teenagers. And actually, I've been married for 19 years.
Yes, today is his anniversary. Him and his wife have been married for 19 years. So congratulations.
I'm a lucky guy. What can I say?
Absolutely.
But our 3 kids are in pretty good spiritual places right now. The things that they like to do really revolve around biblical study activities, and I've been thinking about that. I've also been thinking about how better to reach millennials. Tamara and I do the college students at our church, do their life group. I teach class to a lot of medical students. How do we need to present this to make it relevant? I don't know that just simply rehashing older biblical stories, standard Sunday school lessons, trying to convince people, to introspect and look and see how sinful you are and then feel guilty and then get saved, that may not translate as much culturally. But how do we go out and get some of these people raised in a non-Christian environment? And it seems to me Christianity's got to be bigger than our culture. I railed a little bit before about not being under the thumb of Republican politics. If we've got the gospel that is God's transforming power for the world, it's got to be big. It can't be something provincial and small that fits inside one political ideology. It's got to be something that's bigger than anything. People need to be able to look at us and go, I want what that person's got. And that, I think we need to keep that in mind. It's not the case that we can simply lead with what we're against and expect people to want to convert to Christianity.
There are some people hearing this whose heads may explode when they hear that.
I don't know. Is that good?
They would say that you They would say that you are.
But Paul was willing to be all things to all people.
Right.
I'm not willing to
Well,
compromise.
not all things. I mean, he wasn't saying all. He's not going to dump his theological convictions.
Yeah, but that's what he said, though. Well, meaning I'm willing. I think we need to present the gospel for what it is, which is something bigger than all of our aspects of culture.
Okay.
Meaning for somebody who's never been a Christian, wasn't raised with Christianity, it needs to be something that they look at and go, wow, okay, I see why you believe in that. I want to believe in it too. And if we lead with what we're against, they're going to turn us off after 5 seconds.
Okay.
I think Andrew is leaning in that,
We could explore.
that he's going to turn us off after 5 seconds.
We could explore that
here.
more, but yeah, we're out of time, so that might be a future episode. We can talk about that.
Indeed.
But anyway, well, that's it. We've finished New Perspective, and who knows what we're going to be doing next. We'll find out. But for now, that's it. So this is Jim, that's Charles, and thank you for watching.
Thanks for listening to Riffs and Rabbit Holes. You can learn more about this podcast at our website, www.riffsinrabbitholes.com. That's riffs, the letter N, rabbitholes.com. There you'll find an archive for MP3 and video, plus a blog page and additional resources related to today's topics. You can also contact us there via email with any questions, comments, and even suggestions for future topics. That's www.riffsinrabbitholes.com. You can also find us on our Facebook page and also our YouTube channel. Again, thanks for listening. Peace be with you.